So, Degeneration X. If there's a special anniversary episode of Raw, or perhaps an overseas show destined to generate millions of dollars, chances are you will see DX. While hearing that entrance music and seeing the arena basked in green lights is always cool, nothing can ever live up to the original incarnation. A good amount of fans roll their eyes these days when the corporate Paul Levesque and Shawn Michaels make their way down to the ring wearing black and green. But there are also fans out there who do recall how DX helped to make the WWF more contemporary in late 1997 and beyond. Degeneration X done a lot to change the WWE, something that was badly needed at the time. This video looks at the genesis and birth of Degeneration X, and to fully tell how it all came to be, we have to go all the way back to 1993. Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon were upper mid-carders in the WWF around the time of Wrestlemania 9. Shawn was the Intercontinental Champion, while Razor had just debuted the previous year. Razor had pinned former WWF Champion Bob Backlund at WrestleMania, while Shawn opened up the show, getting a win over Tatanka. The day after WrestleMania 9, a newcomer came into the World Wrestling Federation. This newcomer was Sean Waltman, and he got a contract after his tryout along with his opponent on the night, Louis Spicolli. Louis would go on to become Rad Radford in the WWF, while Sean would eventually become the 1-2-3 Kid after getting an upset win over Razor Ramon on Raw. Thanks to their feud here, Razor took a liking to Sean Waltman and the two became friends. In June of 1993, Shawn was seeking a bodyguard character to go along with his gimmick. Shawn also stated he didn't have many friends in the World Wrestling Federation at this time, and he wasn't only looking for a work colleague, but he also wanted a friend. Shawn had seen a character on WCW named Vinny Vegas, who Shawn instantly thought was funny and entertaining. Shawn managed to get Vinny Vegas into the World Wrestling Federation, and thus Diesel was born. Shawn Michaels and Diesel, real name Kevin Nash, became instant friends, and to this day, Kevin Nash credits Shawn Michaels for the success he would have in the wrestling business. He was seriously floundering in WCW at the time. So we have Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid as friends on one side, and Shawn and Diesel are buddies on the other. The two pairs of friends would come together as a group known as The Clique. In 1995, newcomer Triple H came into the World Wrestling Federation and The Clique took him in. Triple H didn't like the party, whereas the remaining members of The Clique very much enjoyed the party, so Hunter became The Clique's designated driver. The Clique used their backstage pool to get themselves booked in matches that only benefited The Clique, we know this for sure. Things would come to a halt though in 1996, as Diesel and Razor Ramon had agreed to join WCW, and eventually so did Sean Waltman. After the curtain call incident occurred where 4 out of the 5 Clique members broke kayfabe in Madison Square Garden by presenting a public goodbye ceremony, Triple H was made the job in the mid-card as a punishment. Shawn, the WWF champion at the time, was completely immune from any such punishments. He was Vince McMahon's golden boy after all. Diesel and Razor debuted in WCW using their real names, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, and they became the Outsiders. Eventually, they formed the New World Order and changed the landscape of WCW forever. Over on the WWF side, things were looking bleak. Shawn Michaels put a lot of pressure on himself as the WWF champion, and the cracks began to show at the beginning of 97. Shawn no longer had his Clique friends surrounding him, and eventually he ended up forfeiting the title and he worked a lighter schedule, while Triple H, meanwhile, was doing all he could to rise back up the ranks. Hunter won the King of the Ring in 1997, which also kick-started a feud with tournament finalist Mankind, and it seemed like his punishment was now well and truly over. With all this going on, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were making headlines on a weekly basis as the NWO became the hottest thing in professional wrestling. WCW was gearing up for Starrcade 97, their biggest ever pay-per-view in company history. When Shawn forfeited the title, it eventually ended up with The Undertaker. WrestleMania 13 saw The Undertaker take the title away from Psycho Sid, and at SummerSlam, The Undertaker was set to defend the championship against Shawn Michaels' eternal rival, Bret Hart. Shawn managed to get himself involved in this match as he was named the special guest referee for the showdown. The night ended with Shawn accidentally smashing a steel chair in The Undertaker's skull and counting the 1, 2, 3, allowing Bret to win the WWF Championship in the process. Had Shawn not counted the 1, 2, 3 in storyline, he would have had to leave the World Wrestling Federation for not carrying out his referee responsibilities. The next 2 episodes of Raw following SummerSlam featured 2 very good Shawn Michaels promos as he solidified his new heel status. While Shawn has never been the most articulate promo guy, these segments featuring Michaels were done very well. In the first interview, conducted by Vince McMahon, Shawn said, "So let me get this straight. You," referring to Vince McMahon, "The Undertaker, Bret Hart and the fans of the World Wrestling Federation are dumping this on my lap. You know something? It's just like you, it's just like Bret Hart, and it's just like all the fans of the WWF to not take responsibility for themselves and pass the buck onto the Heartbreak Kid. Let me tell everybody what the story is. It's no secret that Bret Hart doesn't like me, but there's one thing for sure. Bret Hart needs me because I am the only man who has ever beat his ass in the WWF. Undertaker, you and I, for as long as we have been here, have never crossed paths, except for now. Undertaker, Shawn Michaels lays down for no one. I don't do it for Bret, I don't do it for you, I don't do it for the fans. The next time you see Shawn Michaels, my super kick will be down your throat." Shawn kicked off the following episode of Raw with another interview, this time conducted by Jim Ross. Shawn announced that he was scheduled to face Mankind that evening before taking shots at the new commissioner of the WWF, Sergeant Slaughter. Slaughter made his way to the ring, trying to make HBK fall in line, but Shawn said that he was expecting to end up on the WWF hit list, and so he got himself an insurance policy. The commentators wondered for the rest of the evening what or who the insurance policy could be as we made our way to the main event. Shawn and Mankind had a short yet brutal match here, and when it seemed Mankind was getting the upper hand in the bout, the insurance policy made his way to the ring, none other than ravishing Rick Rude. I jumped out of my seat when I saw this when I was younger. It was great seeing Rick Rude back in wrestling. Along with Rick Rude coming to ringside, Triple H and Chyna also surrounded the ring. Rude ended up hitting Mankind with a steel chair and Shawn got the win. After the match, Undertaker made his way down to the ring as Raw went off the air. Had Shawn Michaels just aligned himself with Triple H on screen? Was this a new group in wrestling? We didn't know. We would have to wait until next week to find out. Rick Rude kicked off the next episode of Raw to elaborate on his new status in the WWF. Rude said he is an insurance salesman, and if people can afford the buck, then Rude can provide the bang. Rude said that he was paid a handsome sum of money to look after Shawn Michaels, and he will continue to provide a premium service to Shawn. It was later announced that The Undertaker would be teaming with Mankind to take on Triple H and Shawn Michaels in the main event of Raw, and Shawn said here that he was annoyed that he had to tag with Triple H as he doesn't wrestle tag matches, but this was all obviously a ruse. Shawn and Hunter did indeed team up here in the main event for the very first time to take on Mankind and The Undertaker. With Chyna and Rick Rude at ringside, it seemed the numbers were very much against Mankind and The Undertaker. The match ended with Rick Rude attempting to hit Taker with a chair, but Undertaker was able to chase him into the ring. Shawn then smashed a chair over Undertaker's head, twice, in the middle of the ring before running off with Chyna, Rude and Triple H. The faction was born right here on this night. That Sunday, the WWF presented In Your House Ground Zero, which featured Shawn vs The Undertaker in the main event. The match ended in a no contest due to interference. The next night on Raw, it was announced that Undertaker vs Shawn Michaels would happen once again, but this time it would be in the very first Hell in a Cell match. In the meantime, Shawn said he would challenge Davey Boy Smith for the European title in the UK, reigniting his feud with Bret Hart and the Hart Foundation in the process. Shawn would go on to defeat both Davey Boy Smith and The Undertaker in the weeks that followed, and he was rewarded with a WWF Championship match against Bret Hart at Survivor Series 97. While Shawn was working against the Bulldog and Undertaker, Triple H feuded with Mankind and Sergeant Slaughter. It was Bret Hart who inadvertently named the group. Bret had called Triple H, Chyna, Rick Rude and Shawn Michaels a bunch of degenerates on the October 13th, 1991 episode of Raw. Shawn then said that their group would fittingly be known as D-Generation X. The group's antics would be turned up a notch in the run-up to Survivor Series. Shawn and Hunter have said in interviews that, at first, the WWF brass were not very pleased with their actions and interviews, fearing that the network would take Raw off the air due to their actions being not so family-friendly. However, the opposite was actually true, as the network loved what they were seeing on TV. Vince McMahon caved and allowed D-Generation X to run rampant on the mic, understanding here that times were changing, and if the WWF were to compete with WCW, who were destroying Raw in the weekly TV ratings, then updating the content of his weekly TV shows would be a wise move. It didn't pay off right away, but D-Generation X, along with Stone Cold Steve Austin, definitely set the wheels in motion for the WWF Attitude Era and the weekly TV victories over WCW that followed. Shawn and Hunter, real-life friends from back in the clique, played the roles of immature and spoiled brats who knew just how good they were in the ring. In reality, Shawn and Hunter were not too far removed from the outsiders in WCW. If Triple H and HBK went to the NWO, they would have fit in perfectly. And if Scott Hall and Kevin Nash came back to the WWF and joined DX, again, they would have fit in perfectly also. Explaining the events of Survivor Series 1997 on YouTube is the equivalent of not only flogging a dead horse, but flogging the dead horse, burying it, digging it up, flogging it again, and burying it again, only to repeat the process twice. Shawn defeated Bret after Vince McMahon ordered for the bell to be rung, and Bret went to WCW. Before the match, we learned that the next pay-per-view would be named In Your House D-Generation X, and during the commercial for this next pay-per-view, we heard the famous DX theme music for the very first time. And the next night on Raw, Shawn, Hunter, Chyna and Rick Rude made their way to the ring with the DX music playing, and so the group now had its full identity. The following week, Rick Rude made his final appearance on Raw, leaving the WWF and DX to join WCW and the NWO. Rick Rude appeared on both Raw and Nitro on the same night here, as Raw was pre-taped and Nitro was live. So let's start the day after Survivor Series 97, which will also give us a chance to talk about other key moments that were only glossed over at the end of the previous DX video. Raw after Survivor Series opened up with DX making their way to the ring, with the now famous DX music playing for the very first time as Shawn, Hunter, Chyna and Rick Rude walked into the arena in Ottawa. Naturally, DX got a harsh welcome from the fans in attendance. Shawn talked about how he just ran Bret Hart out of the WWF, and now his friends in WCW, referring to Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, are going to make life difficult for the Hitman down in World Championship Wrestling. Shawn also took shots at what he called the dinosaurs of WCW when he said, "I ran Bret Hart down south with the rest of those dinosaurs. You see, the Heartbreak Kid is the only man in this business that will ever be on top, that will ever be number one, that will ever be the icon. It's this simple. Not Bret Hart, not Hulk Hogan, not Randy Savage. None have the will to be the best. I have something that the rest of you will never have, and that is God-given, natural, pure talent." Ken Shamrock interrupted Shawn's promo, calling the group a disgrace as he challenged Shawn Michaels to a match. Shawn tried to get out of this showdown, but Sergeant Slaughter made his way to the ring and announced that Shawn would defend his newly won WWF title against Ken Shamrock at the next In Your House pay-per-view. Slaughter also announced that the main event of Raw that night would see Ken Shamrock taking on Triple H. The match, of course, ended due to DX interference. The next night on Raw, Sergeant Slaughter announced that he himself will battle Triple H, also at the next In Your House pay-per-view, appropriately named D-Generation X. This episode of Raw also featured the classic Bret Screwed Bret Vince McMahon promo, and also this was Rick Rude's final appearance in the World Wrestling Federation. The November 24th Raw kicked off with Rick Rude's theme music playing in the arena. Handsome Harvey Whippleman came out. Acting here as Rick Rude, he introduced DX as they made their way to the ring for a promo. Shawn looked at Harvey Whippleman and said, "Well, Lord knows, that was a tough spot to fill," before shoving him to the ground, taking shots at Rick Rude here just 1 week after he had left. Shawn said that since the Montreal match, he has been having trouble sleeping, and the events have played over in his mind so much that he needs to get some closure. Shawn announced that Bret Hart is in the arena and DX would call him out later in the show. When it was time for the segment and Shawn was in the ring, out walked a mini Bret Hart. DX laughed as they reenacted the events of Survivor Series in the middle of the ring. The jabs would keep coming the next week on Raw as Triple H made quick work of Jim Neidhart in the main event before spray painting WCW on his back. On to December's In Your House pay-per-view then, D-Generation X. Jim Ross opens up the show saying that the event is sold out with hundreds being turned away at the door, which is simply not true. There are plenty of empty seats during this show, with a number of around 6,300 in attendance. In Your House DX isn't one of my favourite pay-per-views of 1997. I think the novelty of DX's own pay-per-view is what makes it memorable, and not necessarily the matches that took place. Triple H defeated Sergeant Slaughter in their boot camp match, which was just a no DQ match really, and Shamrock vs Michaels ended in a disqualification when Triple H and Chyna interfered. After the match, Owen Hart made his return to the WWF, beating down Shawn Michaels and setting up the next feud here for D-Generation X. It's a shame that the WWF didn't go the full distance with Owen versus Shawn. There was a natural rivalry here, the storyline wrote itself, but Owen was never given a lengthy feud with Shawn. Instead, Shawn and Owen had a title match on Raw that also ended in a DQ, and Owen moved into a feud with Triple H. Before this happened though, Sergeant Slaughter tried to be smart by booking Shawn Michaels vs Triple H on the December 22nd episode of Raw, hoping this would cause tensions within the group. In a match for Shawn's European title, HBK lay down for Hunter, letting Triple H become the new European champion while sticking it to Commissioner Slaughter in the process. Something you should take note of here though is Jim Cornette's excellent commentary work here. He was so good that it needs brought up. When the pinfall happened, listen to what Cornette said here on the headset.
It was a ruse, a ploy, a plot, a plan, a charade, a conspiracy, a sham. We've been conned, hoodwinked, bamboozled, flim-flammed, and the wool pulled over our eyes even. Slaughter apparently...
So good. On to 1998 then, and the next big pay-per-view was the Royal Rumble. Triple H around this time was feuding with Owen Hart, but Triple H was injured, while Shawn reignited his feud with The Undertaker, who also had his hands full at the time with Kane. Undertaker vs HBK was booked for the 1998 Royal Rumble, a casket match, and in the lead up, DX would tease that Kane had joined the faction, but this was a lie, intended to provoke The Undertaker. The Royal Rumble in 1998 was an important event in the history of DX. During Shawn's casket match with The Undertaker, HBK's back clipped the edge of the casket as he took a back body drop from the ring onto the floor. Shawn said he didn't notice any significant damage at first, but the next morning he couldn't get out of bed. Shawn was injured badly, but he was still the WWF champion after the Royal Rumble. Stone Cold Steve Austin had won the Rumble match, and Austin vs Michaels had been penciled in for WrestleMania 14. Knowing he had to get to WrestleMania, the decision was made for Shawn Michaels to not work another match until his encounter with Austin. Shawn was originally scheduled to be in the tag main event at No Way Out of Texas in February, but Savio Vega took his place. Triple H was also injured around this time, and he wouldn't be ring ready until February of 1998. However, he did indeed make it to No Way Out of Texas. Mike Tyson was brought into the World Wrestling Federation to act as the special enforcer for the WrestleMania 14 title match, and along the way, Tyson joined DX. At WrestleMania 14, Shawn Michaels dropped the title to Steve Austin in a decent match. By no means was it a WrestleMania classic, but given the pain that Shawn Michaels was in during this encounter, it's more than passable. In the end, Mike Tyson turned on DX and counted the 1-2-3, albeit his count was super fast. It's been reported that everyone was on eggshells around HBK during this time, worried that he might just give up and forfeit the title before getting to WrestleMania, and it's also been reported that The Undertaker was standing at the curtain during WrestleMania 14 to ensure Shawn did indeed drop the title to Austin. This is one of these stories that's been reported for years, and Shawn Michaels said himself recently that there was absolutely no truth to this story. I'll put a link in the video description for you to check out, courtesy of the Inside the Ropes YouTube channel. In this video, Shawn said that he didn't even see The Undertaker that day. Shawn retired here after WrestleMania, and it was up to Triple H to lead a new D-Generation X. The following night on Raw, Triple H made his way to the ring and said, "You dropped the ball, but don't worry HBK, because Triple H picked it up. Now the ball is in my court. I'll take care of the worries, I'll take care of the problems, and I'll make the decisions." This is the genesis of D-Generation X. Tonight, in front of the world, I form the DX Army. An army that will take care of business that should have been taken care of from the very start. And when you start an army, when you set out to do what no one else can do, the first thing you do is you look to your blood, you look to your buddies, you look to your friends, you look to the clique. Shawn Waltman then made his way to the ring, fresh from WCW. Shawn then took the mic and said, "I heard Hulk Hogan on television saying I couldn't cut the mustard. Well, Hulk Hogan, you suck, pal. I don't think you have any kind of room to talk about anybody cutting the mustard. And also, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall would be standing right here with us if they weren't being held hostage by WCW." Shawn Waltman was renamed X-Pac, and he was now the newest member of DX. Later that night, Triple H also recruited the new Age Outlaws, Jesse James and Billy Gunn, as another two new members of DX. The DX Army was now officially formed. There are plenty of fans out there who prefer this iteration of DX, and it's easy to see why. They soon became fan favourites in the World Wrestling Federation due to their antics and promos. The intent was to keep DX as bad guys, but this was during the era of bad guys being cool, and the fans couldn't help but cheer for Triple H's DX Army. The coming together of the Road Dogg Jesse James and Badass Billy Gunn was more out of necessity than anything else. Both men had been working in the WWF for years prior to their tag team formation, and both men had difficulties breaking out as big stars in the World Wrestling Federation. Billy Gunn had been a tag champion in the Smoking Guns tag team, while Jesse James had been associated with Intercontinental Champion Jeff Jarrett. When both men tried to break out as single stars in 1996 and 97, things had gotten arguably worse for both Jesse James and Billy Gunn. Fortunately, when the two men came together, they were able to leave a long-lasting impression on wrestling fans, becoming one of the Attitude Era's premier tag teams. This video takes a look at how the Road Dogg Jesse James and Badass Billy Gunn came together to form the New Age Outlaws. Jesse James first stepped foot in a WWF ring back in August of 1994, having a dark match against Barry Hardy that is actually available to watch on the WWE Network. Billed as Brian Armstrong, the Road Dogg was successful in this match, but he wasn't offered a contract straight away. He went back to his former employer, WCW, for a few months before getting invited back to the World Wrestling Federation in April of 1995. He would then be put with Jeff Jarrett pretty much instantly, acting as Jeff's roadie, as Jeff was doing the whole country singer gimmick at the time, hence the name Roadie, which would evolve into the Road Dogg. While on TV we wouldn't see the roadie get into the ring too often to begin with, he did work quite a few house shows and dark matches, but ultimately both Jeff and the Road Dogg walked out of the WWF after the In Your House 2 pay-per-view. Jesse James then found work in Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the USWA before making his eventual return to the WWF. Jeff Jarrett had sang the With My Baby Tonight song while he was in the WWF, and to turn Road Dogg babyface, it was explained that Jeff Jarrett was actually a fraud. It wasn't he who sang With My Baby Tonight, but it was actually the roadie who lent his voice to the song. Now, if you think this is an effective way to create a new babyface in the World Wrestling Federation during late 1996, then you're out of your mind, but this is what happened. And somebody felt this was the best way to create this new babyface character in Jesse James. In saying this, the whole With My Baby Tonight angle was to set up a feud between Jarrett and the roadie while both men were still employed with the World Wrestling Federation, hence the footage of the roadie singing the song during the In Your House 2 rehearsals. And the WWF must have felt that the angle would be strong enough to carry the roadie upon his WWF return. It wasn't. Now named the real Double J Jesse James, seeing as Jeff Jarrett was now the fake Double J and all that, Jesse James would come to the ring singing With My Baby Tonight before matches, and it was as bad as you could imagine. Wrestling fans did not care who really sang the song. They didn't want to cheer for a country singing babyface. There was nothing for the WWF to market here in terms of merchandise. It was just a real bad idea, but at least it got the roadie back on WWF screens. Someone else who was having his own creative issues at the exact same time was Billy Gunn, and boy, he was near enough suffering from the exact same problems. Billy Gunn had joined the WWF in 1993, teaming up with his kayfabe brother Bart Gunn to form the Smoking Guns tag team. The Smoking Guns were these throwback cowboy characters, coming to the ring with cowboy hats and wearing denim, and to be fair, they done pretty alright for themselves, winning the WWF Tag Team Championships 3 times. The team, however, had gotten a little stale in 1996, and the decision was made to break up the Smoking Guns and see how both men fared in singles competition, starting off with obviously feuding with each other. Billy Gunn competed in the Wrestlemania 13 free-for-all show, defeating Flash Funk here while also catching the attention of the Honky Tonk Man. The Honky Tonk Man in storyline was looking for a protege to take under his wing, promising us that this new protege would be the next big thing in wrestling. Disco Inferno from WCW was supposed to be the original protege. He even had his silhouette placed in a WWF magazine to tease his arrival, but Disco ended up re-signing with WCW and therefore the WWF were forced to change plans. I mentioned in my WCW Cruiserweights video that I was a fan of Disco Inferno in WCW, and while it would have been fascinating to see how the WWF booked him, I find it hard to imagine him getting a good run in the World Wrestling Federation. Starting his New York career off as Honky Tonk Man's protege may have been an early nail in the coffin, but anyway, Disco wouldn't be coming to the WWF, and so the floundering Billy Gunn was selected as the protege. Billy would get renamed, Rockabilly was born, and he was revealed as the protege at In Your House Revenge of the Taker, 1 month after WrestleMania 13. Keep in mind that Billy Gunn had punched Honky Tonk Man just a few weeks prior, further proof here that the WWF was forced to change direction as the Revenge of the Taker show was approaching. Before Rockabilly was unleashed to wrestling fans across the world, Honky Tonk tried to enlist Jesse James as his protege, resulting in Jesse smashing Honky Tonk Man's guitar in the middle of the ring. This meant that Jesse James would be facing the surprise protege at Revenge of the Taker, and yeah, when Rockabilly walked out to take on Jesse James, the reaction was very, very flat. Had this been Disco Inferno versus Jesse James, it would have been a cool moment to look back on, but instead, the unveiling of Rockabilly has become more comedic than anything else. Fair dues to Billy Gunn though, he came out dancing, trying to get into the character that really wasn't him at all, and he went along with it all to try and move up the ladder, but even Billy himself must have known that this wasn't it, Chief. This gimmick was pretty much dead on arrival. You can see the problem then. Both Jesse James and Billy Gunn were stuck with poor gimmicks here in the middle of 1997, a time when things were beginning to shift in the land of wrestling. Gimmicks like this weren't going to go far. People wanted more gritty and somewhat realistic characters instead of singers or 50s inspired rock and roll gimmicks. I know that's hypocritical when I just said that Disco Inferno would have been interesting in the WWF during 1997, but the difference with Disco Inferno was how much he actually got into the gimmick, how he made it work in WCW, how he was actually amusing to watch. With Jesse James and Billy Gunn, you could just tell these guys wanted nothing to do with the gimmicks bestowed upon them. What makes this worse, and this is something I'm sure many of you may be surprised about, even those who watched the WWF during this time period, but after the Revenge of the Taker pay-per-view, Jesse James and Rockabilly kept their gimmicks for a further 6 months. 6 whole months. In the back of my mind I thought it was maybe 2 months tops, I didn't think it was that long. Jesse James said, "When I was the real Double J, I was trying to be a babyface. I was singing that song on the way to the ring, and it wasn't the real me. Backstage, I knew I was more quick-witted, and I knew I could make people laugh. So I thought, what if I could try and do that out there with an audience? Vince Russo gave me the chance to do that. Billy was Rockabilly, and I was the real Double J. We were working each other in the first match every night, and we were just frustrated creatively. We kept going to Russo, we kept hammering on his door, and even though we didn't have any ideas, we did know that we were frustrated. Russo said, 'Well, what if I put you guys together?' So it was Vince Russo's idea to put the New Age Outlaws together, and this came straight from the Road Dogg's mouth. You're free to check out his Legends with JBL show on the WWE Network for the direct quote. This contradicts what Bruce Pritchard said on his podcast, as Bruce said it was a Shawn Michaels idea. I'd lean more on what Road Dogg said here, simply because it came straight from the horse's mouth. Now, I know the instant reaction is to say that Vince Russo takes credit for everything, so you might be surprised to hear that Russo himself does not take credit for the Outlaws, instead saying it was a Vince McMahon idea. So Road Dogg says it was Russo, Russo says it was Vince, and Bruce Pritchard says it was Shawn Michaels. Who knows, but let's move on. The formation of the Outlaws then would happen on Shotgun Saturday Night, of all places. October 11th, 1997, Rockabilly is scheduled to take on Flash Funk. Towards the end of the match, Honky Tonk Man accidentally trips up Rockabilly, costing him the match. Jesse James then comes to the ring wearing some new threads and saying his name is now Road Dogg, a throwback to his old roadie name when he ran with Jeff Jarrett. The Road Dogg said in the middle of the ring, "Me and you have a lot in common. We have been curtain jerkers from day one, and don't say we haven't. We have been left flat on our backs, 1, 2, 3, looking at the lights. That's what we've been doing. Do you like it? Do you like working on Shotgun every week? Do you like looking at the lights? Let me answer that for you. No, you don't. I took one loser to the Intercontinental Championship, and my friend, you are not a loser. So me and you together, I smell money." A great promo here. It's a shame it went down on Shotgun Saturday Night and it isn't talked about all that often. Road Dogg was basically admitting to the world that both he and Billy Gunn were lower tier WWF superstars, but together they could maybe become more. Give Russo credit for this one. A little realism goes a long way, especially when your gimmick has been that of a country singer or a 50s rock and roll enthusiast. Rockabilly hit Honky Tonk with his guitar before leaving the ring with the Road Dogg. Jim Ross asked on commentary if this could be the forming of a brand new tag team, and the New Age Outlaws had just been formed. We would have to wait until the October 20th edition of Raw to see Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg on the WWF's flagship TV show. The Road Dogg's promo coming to the ring here is a very early version of his usual shtick, so it's really fun to go back and see this work in progress. Of note, Road Dogg ends his promo by saying, "If you didn't know, you better page somebody."
And if you didn't know that, then you better page somebody.
Road Dogg explained later that he and Brian Lee, maybe better known as the fake Undertaker or Chains of the DOA, used to say backstage, "You better page somebody," back then when pagers were all the rage. As the weeks went on, the saying went from "you better page somebody" to "your ass better call somebody." Road Dogg's promo here evolving along with technology, it seems, as pagers became obsolete. Again, check it out for yourself. October 20th, 1997 episode of Raw. And if you didn't know, you better page somebody. Ernie Ladd also used to say "your ass better call somebody," so maybe that was the inspiration. Anyway, the Outlaws still didn't have a proper tag team name as they defeated the Headbangers on their debut Raw match, but this was already leagues better than what both men had been doing in the past, adding a little bit of comedy to their match and also wrestling a much more aggressive heel style. The match ended with Billy Gunn smashing a boombox over Thrasher's head. Road Dogg also had some choice words for the commentary team after the match.
You're a freak! You're a freak!
Yeah, you're not though.
Hey,
Why don't you go take...
The next week on Raw, Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg were scheduled to take on the New Blackjacks. Road Dogg secured the pinfall win after Billy Gunn assisted with a chair shot, and these kind of tactics would become a regular occurrence in tag matches that involved Gunn and James. It even became a regular occurrence in matches that they interfered in. This helped get the men over as heels in the WWF, and again, it was much better than what they had been doing. November of 1997 though would be a huge month for the team, thanks to their feud with the Legion of Doom, which seriously elevated James and Gunn to the next level. Before the Legion of Doom angle properly kicked off, the Outlaws worked their very first pay-per-view as a team, Survivor Series 1997, and the Outlaws were the survivors for their traditional Survivor Series team here. Anyway, after stealing the Road Warriors' shoulder pads, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn managed to get themselves a tag title shot on the November 24th episode of Raw against the Legion of Doom, and after some underhanded tactics, Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg won the titles, running away to their parked car after the match while holding the gold like a pair of bank robbers, as Jim Ross put it. The very next week, these pair of bank robbers came out to the ring with their new tag team name, the New Age Outlaws. So coming from being Jeff Jarrett's roadie and a happy-go-lucky country singer, and coming from being a smoking gun and rockabilly, badass Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg had become the tag team champions. Gunn had held the tag team titles previously, but this was the Road Dogg's first ever taste of championship gold within the WWF. A perfect example here of letting guys be themselves and allowing them to try and make their own way in wrestling instead of lumbering them with silly gimmicks. There have been other tag teams throughout the years that were thrown together because they had nothing better to do, and the results weren't always great, but for whatever reason, the New Age Outlaws worked incredibly well. I think a lot of it definitely came down to the Road Dogg's ability to run his mouth during entrances, but to be fair also, Billy Gunn, in my opinion, was the better wrestler of the two. On paper, before pairing the men up, the idea of having Jesse James and Billy Gunn paired up as a tag team maybe had lower mid-card written all over it, but they proved a lot of people wrong because they were given a chance to do so. Anyway, the feud with the Legion of Doom continued, which soon led to the New Age Outlaws sharing the ring with Shawn Michaels and Triple H, better known as DX at this time. The Outlaws and DX led a beating into the Road Warriors on Raw, an interesting segment when you think of how Shawn and Hunter probably wouldn't have cared all that much about sharing a ring with Jesse James and Billy Gunn just a few months prior. DX endorsed the Outlaws here, both in a kayfabe sense and in a real life sense. Getting that rub from DX on TV went a long way in legitimising Road Dogg and Billy Gunn. Once the Legion of Doom feud ended, the Outlaws' next big feud was with Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie, and who could forget the segment when the Outlaws pushed a dumpster containing Jack and Charlie off the side of the entranceway on Raw. This stunt also helped get the Outlaws over, and when it looked like the Outlaws were showing some remorse for their actions backstage, Shawn Michaels and Triple H again endorsed the tag team when they said that's what they need to do to become superstars. Billy Gunn believes that it was this dumpster incident that put the New Age Outlaws on the map. He credits this night as the making of the Outlaws. This all led to a dumpster match at WrestleMania 14, which was very entertaining. What is a dumpster match? Well, think of a casket match. Replace the casket with a dumpster, and you have a dumpster match. With the Outlaws taking on Cactus Jack and Terry Funk here though, you best believe this would turn into a street fight, and that's exactly what happened. A good match here that saw the New Age Outlaws lose their tag team titles, but this didn't mean the push had stopped. Far from it actually. In many ways, this was just the beginning for the Road Dogg and badass Billy Gunn, as the very next night on Raw, Triple H formed the new DX Army, and the New Age Outlaws became members of D-Generation X, the WWF's hottest and most controversial faction. By joining DX, the Outlaws would get much more TV time, many more match opportunities, better merchandise checks, and a greater overall standing in the WWE's history books. DX's invasion of WCW is one of those events in wrestling that will live on forever. On April 27th, 1998, Raw and Nitro were both held in Virginia, with the arenas just 20 miles apart from each other. DX took advantage of this by visiting the Norfolk Scope Arena, home of WCW Nitro, that evening. Throughout the Raw presentation, we were shown footage of DX outside the Nitro Arena, talking to WCW attendees as they swore allegiance to DX and said that Eric Bischoff in WCW sucks. DX tried to get in the front doors of the arena while shouting that Kevin Nash and Scott Hall were being held against their will, with Triple H hilariously shouting, "POWCW, let my people go." DX then brought their Jeep to the back of the Norfolk Scope in an attempt to drive into the arena, but the shutters were closed and DX was not able to drive straight into WCW Nitro. Eric Bischoff has said, in hindsight, one of his biggest regrets was not allowing DX to come into the arena that evening, as everyone would have tuned into WCW Nitro to see D-Generation X on the show. Kevin Nash has shared the same sentiments, saying that WCW had a golden opportunity here that they didn't take advantage of. The segments were so good that 2 weeks later, DX also tried to get into WCW headquarters at the CNN Center. During the time of the DX WCW invasion, for some reason, the WWF was still trying to portray the group as heels. DX mainly feuded with the DOA in LOD 2000 in these initial weeks, but the crowd was getting very much behind Triple H's faction. After the WCW segments, the fans fully supported DX, and they became one of the most popular and entertaining groups in the history of the WWE. D-Generation X of this era had their greatest feud with The Nation, further cementing them as fan favourites as leaders Triple H and The Rock began their rivalry over the Intercontinental Championship. During Triple H's feud with The Rock, DX dressed up as The Nation during a promo. It was a good promo, it got the right reaction, but years later, X-Pac has called this one of his biggest regrets in wrestling, for obvious reasons. The segment though is well remembered, and it wouldn't be a DX video without bringing this up. Triple H ended up defeating The Rock at SummerSlam 98 for the Intercontinental title in an excellent ladder match, the best match of this night in my opinion. Check this one out for sure. Shawn Michaels came back to the WWF as commissioner, and he initially sided with Vince McMahon and the corporation in taking down DX. It seemed that D-Generation X had taken Shawn into the group after the corporation turned their back on HBK, but in the end, Shawn Michaels was nowhere near ready for a proper TV return. He had developed further personal issues that needed addressed, and he was sent home by the WWE. As time went on, Triple H wanted more than just the Intercontinental title. He wanted to be the biggest heel in the company, something that, in real life, his fellow DX members were not ready for. Road Dogg, Billy and X-Pac felt that DX still had plenty to give. They were on a roll, merch sales were off the charts, and they were in a good main position in the company. But Triple H felt his natural calling in wrestling was to be a heel. He wanted to go on his own and leave D-Generation X. The wheels were put in motion in January of 1999 when Chyna turned on Triple H and joined the corporation. At WrestleMania 15 that year, Chyna turned on her fellow corporate member Kane, helping Triple H defeat him in their scheduled match that night. We thought that Chyna had rejoined Hunter and DX, but during X-Pac's match with Shane McMahon that evening, Hunter turned on X-Pac, delivering a pedigree and siding with the corporation along with Chyna. So Kane was out of the corporation and Triple H and Chyna were in. X-Pac and Kane then formed a tag team, even capturing the tag titles twice during their time together. The group began falling apart in the weeks that followed, with Billy Gunn getting frustrated with Kane's presence within the faction. This led to Billy leaving, and eventually he teamed with Chyna to take on Road Dogg and X-Pac over the rights to use the DX name. The tag match happened at Fully Loaded 99, with Road Dogg and X-Pac scoring the win. It was all for nothing though, as later in the year, every member of the group reunited, this time as full-blown heels. Triple H secured the WWF Championship at the beginning of 2000, and DX's primary mission was to protect Hunter from the likes of Steve Austin and The Rock. Down the road, DX was absorbed into the Helmsley-McMahon faction, and by the end of 2000, Triple H pretty much became the WWF's biggest heel and a huge solo star. Other members of DX ended up feuding with each other, and the team was pretty much now completely done with. They did reunite on the November 6th, 2000 episode of Raw is War to take on the Radicals, with the exception of X-Pac, who was out with an injury, but this was Triple H's last involvement with the group until reforming with Shawn Michaels in 2006. When D-Generation X reformed in 2006, many had high hopes. Shawn Michaels and Triple H were early pioneers of the Attitude Era, laying the land for what was to come in late 1997 and early 1998. In 2006 though, times had changed. The landscape of the WWE was quite different, and along with this, the original degenerates themselves were very different people. Triple H was now married into the McMahon family, and Shawn Michaels had found God. The once disruptive, unruly and boisterous duo of HBK and Triple H were now pretty settled down, and while many fans thought the reintroduction of D-Generation X would mean a return to anarchy in the WWE, again, times had changed for not only Shawn Michaels and Triple H, but the WWE itself was a much different place when comparing 2006 to 1997. Still, DX's reunion gave hope to older fans of the WWE, and you best believe that the WWE would milk that hope for all it's worth. So in today's video, let's look at the 2006 reunion of D-Generation X. Triple H and Shawn Michaels had an excellent feud between 2002 and 2004, with Shawn as the babyface and Triple H as the heel. Their matches together were excellent, and I think this was the main reason why the DX reunion didn't happen sooner. HBK vs Triple H happened on multiple occasions throughout this time period, with some of their matches being bona fide classics, but we will talk about this feud another time. All you need to know is Shawn and Hunter in storyline were not on great terms going into 2006. The seeds were planted for a DX reunion at WrestleMania 22. HBK had a match with Vince McMahon at Mania because Shawn had told Vince to grow up and move on from the Survivor Series 1997 incident, something that Vince didn't take too kindly to. During the match, on top of a ladder, Shawn performed the classic DX crotch chop out of nowhere, getting a huge ovation in the process. It was odd seeing this. Shawn had not performed the crotch chop during his entire return run, and HBK harkening back to his old DX days got the fans going nuts at WrestleMania 22. That wasn't all though. Later in the night, Triple H had a match with John Cena, and Triple H also performed the classic DX taunt. Keep in mind though, Triple H was still a heel here, but the fans were very much in his corner during this entire bout. So this got the world talking. Why did HBK and Hunter do this in their separate matches? Raw the following evening gave us no hints at all about what was going to happen. Things just carried on as normal. Shawn remained a babyface and his feud with Vince McMahon would continue, while Triple H would continue working as a bad guy. The April 10th edition of Raw the following week saw Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon attend church to mock Shawn Michaels and his tag partner for the upcoming pay-per-view. Yes, Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon were going to take on Shawn Michaels and God live at WWE Backlash. By the way, this segment with Shane and Vince going to church was great. If you haven't saw this, go out of your way to watch it. Also at Backlash, Triple H would be featured in a WWE Championship match, a triple threat showdown that also featured Edge and WWE Champion John Cena. It must have been decided then by the April 17th edition of Raw that DX were indeed going to get back together. At the top of this show, Shawn took Vince out with sweet chin music, only to run back into the ring and perform the DX crotch chop once again to Vince McMahon. After this segment, Vince McMahon took out his frustrations on Triple H by booking him in a handicap match against Edge and John Cena. While we would still have to wait a while for the official DX reunion, this was the first time that a Triple H babyface turn had been hinted at. I definitely would have preferred if Shawn Michaels turned heel and the reunited DX returned as bad guys, but it's irrelevant now, we'll talk a bit about that later. Michaels also squared off with Umaga on this episode of Raw, and both HBK and Triple H lost their matches on this night. So with Backlash, Shawn Michaels and God took on Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon. People ripped this apart and call it dumb and silly, and yes, that's the whole point of it. And it's really surprising to me how many people seem to take the moral high ground with this when really the whole thing was put together as a joke. I thought Vince McMahon's work was excellent during this whole program, and Shane too doesn't get enough credit. If you watch Shane closely during all of this, he knows it's dumb, he knows his dad has lost the plot, but he is forced to play along with it while he shakes his head in disbelief. Now, I'm not saying for a moment that this was one of Vince McMahon's finest ideas when it comes to creative, but it's just so silly that it has become memorable. People also say that Shawn's beliefs were being mocked here, but come on, this is Shawn Michaels. If he didn't want to do anything on TV, all he had to do was say no and it wouldn't have happened. Anyway, Shawn took out both Shane and Vince with super kicks. He performed the crotch chop, and it seemed like Shawn was going to win this match. However, the Spirit Squad came to the ring to attack HBK. This eventually led to Vince McMahon getting the pinfall win. Later in the evening, Triple H was pinned in a forgotten yet excellent triple threat match with Edge and John Cena. After losing the match, Triple H took out his opponents with his sledgehammer and delivered the DX crotch chops to his opponents. The next night on Raw, Vince took the night off and allowed the Spirit Squad to run Monday Night Raw. The Spirit Squad made HBK and Triple H referees on this night. HBK refereed the Rob Conway vs Kane match, and Triple H would referee the main event featuring Kenny of the Spirit Squad taking on John Cena for the WWE Championship. When Kenny put his hands on Triple H, the Game punched Kenny and took out members of the Spirit Squad before making his way back up the ramp, leaving John Cena to get attacked by the remaining members of the male cheerleader faction. As Triple H made his way to the top of the ramp, Shawn Michaels walked out. The crowd began chanting for DX as the two looked at each other, but Triple H walked away as Shawn dashed to the ring to take out the Spirit Squad. The two men now had a common enemy, and the reunion had been officially teased on TV. We would need to wait until next week though to see what would happen next. The May 8th edition of Raw then, Triple H kicked off the show by saying he wants a WWE Championship match. Vince McMahon came to the ring, and Vince said he would not be giving Triple H a title match due to Hunter defying him over the last few weeks. When Triple H called his boss Vince, Vince got angry and said his name was Mr. McMahon, and he told Triple H to go home and take the night off. Angered, Triple H came to the ring during the main event, a main event pitting John Cena and Shawn Michaels against the Spirit Squad. It seemed like Hunter was coming to the ring to help Michaels, but instead he pedigreed John Cena. The story here though was that Triple H had once again defied Vince McMahon. The next week then, Triple H thought he would be starting the show in a WWE Championship match. However, Vince changed the match into a 3-on-2 tornado tag match that also had the IC title on the line, along with the WWE Championship. Triple H wasn't happy. This meant he could lose the match without being involved in the final decision, and this is exactly what happened. Shelton Benjamin pinned Rob Van Dam to win the IC title and put an end to the match. Later in the evening, Kenny of the Spirit Squad would face Shawn Michaels, and Shane informed Hunter that Vince expected him to be in Kenny's corner for the match. Shane would also referee this match, and during the bout, Triple H hit Shane with the sledgehammer when Michaels ducked out of the way. Triple H left the ring saying it was an accident, but he didn't look very remorseful. Triple H apologised the next week on Raw, leading to Shawn confronting him and calling him a Vince McMahon sellout. Later in the evening, when the Spirit Squad were laying a beatdown into Michaels, Vince McMahon ordered Triple H to come to the ring and finish off the job and prove his loyalty to McMahon. When Kenny took Triple H's sledgehammer to do the job himself, Hunter got mad and took out the entire Spirit Squad as Raw went off the air. The June 5th episode of Raw then, and Vince McMahon felt he knew a way to put an end to all of this Triple H nonsense, a way for both he and the game to put this all behind them and move on. On this episode of Raw, Vince McMahon would invite Hunter to join the Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club. Of course, Triple H wouldn't agree to this, and to help him come to his senses, Shane decided to spike Hunter's water. Triple H saw it coming and decided to swap the water bottles while Shane took a phone call. In the ring later, Triple H pretended to feel woozy and collapsed to the mat. Soon afterwards, the effects of the magic water hit Shane like a ton of bricks as he too fell to the floor. This prompted Triple H to get back on his feet and hit the pedigree on Vince. A great little segment here thanks to Shane's great acting. Now that Triple H had let out Vince McMahon, there was no going back. Finally, on the June 12th, 2006 episode of Raw, DX would officially reunite. Triple H was booked into a gauntlet match against the entire Spirit Squad as Vince McMahon watched from the stage. Of course, the match would turn into a group beatdown on Triple H, and when the last Spirit Squad member was due to come to the ring, well, he didn't make it out of the entranceway. Instead, he was thrown onto the stage by Shawn Michaels, who had come to help Triple H even the odds. With Vince looking on, Shawn ran to the ring and helped Triple H clear out the Spirit Squad members. The two men looked at each other, gave a DX high five, turned to Vince McMahon and began doing the old DX crotch chop once again. DX was back and their new enemy was Vince McMahon. From this night on, DX would play an important part on Monday Night Raw for months and months to come, and the antics would begin the very next week. Vince started the June 19th episode of Raw off by saying he would destroy DX before the pair could get any kind of momentum. DX started playing pranks early as Vince made his way to the ring, and when Vince got in the ring, he had to quickly leave as Shane told him that Stephanie had just gone into labour, leaving the coach in charge of Raw that evening. Of course, Stephanie wasn't in labour, this was another DX prank. Later during the broadcast, the WWE wasted no time in promoting the next pay-per-view, Vengeance, as the first pay-per-view to feature the returning DX in action, as Shawn and Hunter was booked to face the entire Spirit Squad. Anyway, on this same broadcast, the Spirit Squad ended up getting covered in green slime as DX set up a trap in the middle of the ring. DX destroyed Vince's office while terrorising the coach, and in the final segment of the show, Shawn and Hunter made their way to the ring with the classic DX theme song once again playing in the arena. Shawn and Hunter went through their old routine as the crowd ate it up. The audience was going nuts here. If it wasn't already clear from the antics going on earlier in the broadcast, then this promo made it crystal clear that this was not the same DX of late 1997 and early 1998. Far from it, actually. This DX was more about comedy and riding the wave of nostalgia and not so much about being company rebels, and this is something that still irks many wrestling fans to this day. I can see both sides of the argument here, and while I would have really liked to have seen the old DX of 1997, realistically that was never going to happen. The old DX worked so well because of that time period, with the NWO making headlines in WCW, and the connection between the Outsiders and DX creating a compelling and interesting dynamic on Monday Night Wrestling TV shows.
Right back at you, HBK!
That kind of reality could never be duplicated. What maybe could have been done though, and something I would have preferred much more, was DX becoming heels during this 2006 return. Of course, DX became big merchandise sellers, and financially having a babyface DX made way more sense, but I think old school fans would have liked to have seen DX being a little rougher around the edges instead of doing this comedy stuff. On top of this, due to Shawn's newfound beliefs, he wouldn't contribute in certain DX skits which may have been considered a bit more mature, and fans were quite vocal about this fact too. People also talked about how this new DX was goofy and silly in comparison to the DX of old, and Shawn Michaels made a point in saying in interviews that this was the whole point. Shawn said that the new DX could never live up to the old one. These guys were now too old to be considered rebels, so HBK and Triple H tried to go along with this sort of aging rock star gimmick with DX where they would do juvenile things, with the intention being that these guys were too old to be doing all of this and therefore it's supposed to be funny. The problem I have with this though is that Shawn Michaels had to explain this, and if it had to be explained, then clearly no one got it in the first place. This isn't the consumer's fault, and maybe nobody got it because it didn't seem like this was the angle that Hunter and Shawn were going for in the first place. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of DX and a fan of both Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but when you turn negative feedback into, well, you didn't get it, it's not our fault, then yeah, you need to accept that it didn't work out as well as what it once did. Fans did, however, really enjoy these early promos, and I remember being stoked to see DX come back. Their first few months were interesting, but it got pretty old pretty quickly. Anyway, to wrap this video up, DX main evented Vengeance, and in the main event, they destroyed the Spirit Squad in their 2-on-5 tag match. DX had a really memorable promo the next night on Raw when Triple H and Shawn Michaels dressed up like Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon, a real highlight of this whole DX reunion. DX would continue feuding with Shane and Vince, but eventually the duo moved on to a feud with Rated RKO, with their match at Cyber Sunday 2006 being quite good. A rematch was booked for New Year's Revolution in January of 2007, and during this match, Triple H tore his quadriceps 15 minutes into the showdown. This took Triple H out of action for around 7 months, but Shawn continued to use the DX theme music and wear the DX colours. The group would again reunite down the road, but we will save that for another time. The last D-Generation X video uploaded to this channel looked at the team's 2006 return. Shawn Michaels and Triple H mainly feuded with Vince McMahon during this run before moving on to a rivalry with Rated RKO. Triple H got injured at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view at the beginning of 2007. Shawn Michaels would continue to represent D-Generation X as he formed a short-lived tag team with Wrestlemania opponent John Cena. The unlikely duo even won won the WWE Tag Team titles on their way to WrestleMania 23. On April 1st, 2007, HBK walked into WrestleMania while the D-Generation X music played in the arena. It was supposed to be Triple H versus Cena in the Mania 23 main event, but Shawn stepped up to the plate and he replaced his best friend. He had a good match with the WWE Champion here, but in the end, Shawn lost. We'll pick up from here then as we look at the final run of D-Generation X. By the time Backlash 2007 came around, Shawn's entrance music was reverted back to his sexy boy theme, and the DX branding was now completely gone. With Triple H out of the picture, HBK moved forward as a solo star once again. Triple H made his comeback at SummerSlam that year, and the decision was made to not reunite D-Generation X on a full-time basis. Shawn and Hunter would, of course, have odd one-night-only reunions over the next year or so. The January 28th, 2008 episode of Raw featured Shawn and Hunter taking on Umaga and Snitsky in a tag team match. They reformed once again on the September 29th, 2008 episode of Raw to take on Chris Jericho and Lance Cade. And then DX also made a comeback on the 800th episode of Raw, held on November 3rd, 2008. Shawn and Hunter took on The Miz and John Morrison here in an entertaining matchup. DX would get together for some backstage promos, mainly to shill WWE merchandise, but it looked like Shawn and Hunter were destined to go their separate ways from this point forward. That all changed after WrestleMania 25. Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker had what many consider the greatest WrestleMania match of all time in 2009. HBK wanted to be the man who ended The Undertaker's legendary WrestleMania winning streak, and so the two men squared off at Mania 25, putting on a legitimate show-stopping performance that kept viewers on the edge of their seats. There's many wrestling matches out there that I feel are overrated with unjustified praise, but trust me, Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 is a match you simply can't miss. The acclamation this match receives is very much justified. In the end, Shawn couldn't beat The Undertaker, and HBK decided to take a break from professional wrestling after the WrestleMania matchup. While away from the ring, Shawn came to terms with his own eventual retirement. HBK said he wanted to go out while he was still performing at a high level, going by the mantra of leave them wanting more and not overstaying your welcome. HBK and the WWE felt that the best thing to do here was to give D-Generation X one final run before Shawn retired, and it would all come to an end at WrestleMania 26, where Shawn would once again square off with The Undertaker, trying to recapture the magic of Mania 25 and leave on a high note. Also at WrestleMania 25, Triple H successfully defended his WWE title against Randy Orton, the leader of Legacy at the time. Legacy was pretty much Orton's own version of the Evolution stable, but this one had a twist. All members of the group were either second or third generation superstars. After a little shuffling around and a few changes, the final team consisted of Randy Orton, Ted DiBiase Jr. and Cody Rhodes, and Triple H would find himself dealing with the Legacy before and after WrestleMania 25. The Triple H vs Legacy feud continued through the spring and summer of 2009, and when the numbers got too much, Triple H decided he would go out and try to find his old DX partner to even the odds. Triple H's search for HBK led him to an office building in San Antonio, Texas, where Shawn Michaels was working as a chef in the staff cafeteria. The legendary Shawn Michaels, who we last saw in a legendary match with The Undertaker, was now flipping burgers for office workers, and Triple H couldn't believe what he was seeing. Throughout the August 10th, 2009 episode of Raw, the game tried to get Shawn Michaels to give up his new profession and return to the ring, but Shawn showed resistance. Even though children were throwing food at the Heartbreak Kid and HBK was having multiple problems in the kitchen. In the end, Shawn decided to leave the job after his boss yelled at him. HBK superkicked his employer and a little girl who was giving him grief, and DX was back in business. The next week on Raw, the DX vs Legacy feud kicked off when Ted DiBiase and Cody Rhodes attacked Shawn and Hunter during a D-Generation X promo. The DX versus Legacy rivalry, Legacy consisting of Cody and DiBiase, would span over 3 pay-per-view events: SummerSlam, Breaking Point, and Hell in a Cell. DX's SummerSlam 2009 entrance was really something else. A remixed version of DX's theme played in the arena as soldiers ran onto the entranceway. Missiles and explosions went off all around the arena. Searchlights scanned through the audience as the WWE tried to make SummerSlam feel like a war zone. HBK and Hunter made their way to the ring in a tank as the audience went nuts. A tank that shot pyro from its cannon. The return of D-Generation X was given much fanfare, and yes, people say that DX had ran its course by now, but I don't care. This was an awesome ring entrance, and I really enjoyed watching it back for this video. The match was decent too. Cody and DiBiase were given a ton of time to get their stuff in. DX fought from underneath for the majority of the match, but a sweet chin music to Cody Rhodes ended the bout. It was more about the novelty of seeing DX back in the ring though, and for fans of Shawn Michaels, it was good to see HBK back inside the squared circle after being away for so long. The Breaking Point match is probably my favourite match of the whole trilogy. This one was the first ever submissions count anywhere match. I'm pretty sure this is the only submissions count anywhere match, but if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. The rules are self-explanatory. There's no pinfalls, no disqualifications, and no countouts. You can only win by making your opponent submit, and submissions can occur anywhere in the building. Breaking Point was held in Montreal, Canada, and when the audience began chanting "You screwed Brett" after DX's entrance, Triple H masterfully made light of the situation by putting all the blame on Shawn while claiming that the King of Kings wasn't even around at Survivor Series 97. Anyway, this is a fun and chaotic match, and the submission only stipulation adds a new layer to the bout. Legacy and DX fight around the arena, and there's a lot of rushing to break up submission holds and things like that. A lot of fans wanted to see Shawn submit in Montreal, and the fans got their wish. Shawn topped out while being locked in a $1 Million Dream and a figure 4 around the ring post. And it was just good to see Triple H and Shawn Michaels lose to 2 younger superstars who were trying to make a name for themselves at the time. Still, the rivalry would continue on into the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. DX versus Legacy inside the cell. The fun and games were now over according to HBK in the game. It was time to get serious. The WWE tried to do something different with this Hell in a Cell match, and you really can't blame them either. This was the first ever Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, and the show featured 3 cell matches, and I do believe that the introduction of the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view really watered down what the Hell in a Cell match was supposed to be. But anyway, DX versus The Legacy was our main event. We already saw CM Punk versus The Undertaker and John Cena versus Randy Orton inside the cell, so again, the WWE would need to try and tell a different story with the final Hell in a Cell match of the evening. Legacy attacks Shawn and Hunter during the DX entrance. A brawl takes place around the outside of the cell that resulted in Triple H taking the crossroads on the entrance ramp. This resulted in Shawn Michaels getting locked inside the Hell in a Cell without a partner. The majority of the match then plays out like a fight for survival. HBK tries his best to overcome the odds while Triple H desperately tries to get into the cell. Triple H ends up leaving. We thought the game had left HBK high and dry, but he returns later with bolt cutters. Triple H gets into the ring, and then the tides just completely turn. Ted DiBiase ends up getting locked outside of the cell, and Cody Rhodes takes a complete beating from D-Generation X. Cody takes a sledgehammer to the head along with sweet chin music, and DX wins the Hell in a Cell match. This was the final match of the Legacy vs DX rivalry. It wasn't a bad series of matches at all, but I'd recommend the Breaking Point submission match if you're only going to choose one. DX would then go after John Cena's WWE Championship at the 2009 Survivor Series in a triple threat match: Cena versus Michaels versus Triple H. Many fans and John Cena himself felt the odds were stacked against the WWE champ here due to Shawn and Triple H's friendship. DX even came to the ring together for the match, but John needn't worry. HBK nailed Triple H with sweet chin music right after the opening bell, much to the surprise of everyone in the arena. This super kick here meant that all bets were off, and Triple H had no problem going after HBK once he regained his composure. A decent match ended with John Cena throwing HBK onto Triple H with an attitude adjustment. Triple H got pinned and Cena retained the title. The DX relationship wasn't damaged at all after the match. Both men understood that it was every man for himself, and so DX continued on to the TLC 2009 pay-per-view. Shawn and Hunter were getting a shot at the WWE Tag Team titles. Strangely enough, Triple H and Shawn Michaels together had never been Tag Team champions, but that would all change after the TLC show in Shawn's hometown of San Antonio, Texas. The tag team champions at the time, Big Show and Chris Jericho, were an odd coupling that turned out to be quite successful. It seemed like the WWE had no clue what to do with the Big Show sometimes. He's been involved in so many tag teams over the years, and he's turned heel so many times that it's difficult to keep track of. But the pairing of Chris Jericho and the Big Show was actually quite decent. Known as Jericho Show, the tag team champions would face their toughest match yet at the TLC pay-per-view when they met Shawn Michaels and Triple H in the ring. The match was also contested under TLC rules, and it turned out to be an excellent bout. The TLC 2009 main event goes on for over 20 minutes, and Shawn's chemistry with Chris Jericho really helped the match move at a quick pace, only slowing down for the big high spots, and there were a lot of high spots in this one. The ending was also really well done. The ladder had been destroyed and it was in two parts, and so Y2J decided to stand on his partner's shoulders to retrieve the belts. This led to the Big Show getting hit with sweet chin music. Triple H then held up half a ladder while Shawn retrieved the belts, and so for the first time in DX history, HBK and Triple H were the WWE Tag Team Champions. Soon afterwards, Hornswoggle became the official mascot of DX. Hornswoggle tried to sue Shawn and Hunter due to the emotional and physical distress they had caused him when DX refused to make Hornswoggle a member. In the end, Shawn and Hunter settled out of Little People's Court, and Hornswoggle became the DX mascot. The January 11th, 2010 episode of Raw saw Mike Tyson return to DX. Tyson was originally scheduled to team up with Jericho to face Hunter and Shawn, but in the end, Tyson turned on Y2J and he realigned himself with DX. A nice callback here to 1998. The end was near though for Shawn Michaels, and D-Generation X would have to wrap up their run before WrestleMania 26 came around on March 28th. Shawn and Hunter dropped the tag team titles on the February 8th episode of Raw to Miz and Big Show. This was actually a triple threat tag team match that also featured the Straight Edge Society. And then Hunter and Shawn had their final tag team match of this run on March 1st. HBK and Hunter failed to win their tag team titles back from Show Miz on this episode of Raw. The Undertaker distracted HBK by appearing on the Titantron, allowing The Miz to score the win. So then, while all of this was going on, the HBK vs Undertaker rematch was set in motion as Shawn, in storyline, became obsessed with wrestling The Undertaker one more time at WrestleMania. Undertaker would only work the match if Shawn put his career on the line, and Shawn agreed to the monumental stipulation. Shawn and Undertaker had another good match at WrestleMania 26, but HBK couldn't put The Undertaker away, and so the career of Shawn Michaels was over. Shawn delivered an emotional speech the next night on Raw, and his old DX buddy Triple H was there to say goodbye to the Heartbreak Kid. DX may have officially been no more, but this didn't stop a multitude of special one-night reunions happening over the following years. Even more shocking is the fact that even after retirement, Shawn Michaels would once again step into the ring alongside Triple H to face the Brothers of Destruction in 2018. Let's take a look at a few notable one-night reunions before talking about the DX vs Brothers of Destruction match. Shawn and Hunter inducted Mike Tyson into the Hall of Fame in 2012, and then a few months later, on the 1000th episode of Raw, Shawn Michaels and Triple H made a special appearance along with X-Pac, Billy Gunn and the Road Dogg. This ended with the ever-entertaining Damien Sandow getting attacked afterwards. Kevin Nash became an honorary member of DX on the January 10th, 2013 NXT tapings. Billy Gunn and X-Pac also showed up, and this one seems to fly under the radar. Damien Sandow once again got destroyed for interrupting the festivities. Soon afterwards, Triple H began the Authority angle, where he and wife Stephanie McMahon would rule over the WWE with an iron fist. This would eventually lead to the in-ring return of the New Age Outlaws, who ended up siding with the Authority, and also Shawn Michaels would become a minor associate of the faction, most notably helping Triple H during his feud with Daniel Bryan, and also helping Triple H in his match against Sting at WrestleMania 31. The Mania match turned into a DX vs NWO brawl at one point. DX also got together on the 25th anniversary of Raw on January 22nd, 2018. Scott Hall appeared alongside Triple H, Shawn Michaels, the Outlaws and X-Pac on this evening, but Kevin Nash couldn't make the trip. And that brings us to Crown Jewel 2018, held on November 2nd in Saudi Arabia. In very basic terms, the WWE were, and still are, paid a handsome sum of money to produce shows in Saudi Arabia. I'm not going to go into details about the evil blood money because everyone's talked about it already, it's been done to death, and that's not what you came here for. The big story at Crown Jewel 2018 was the in-ring return of Shawn Michaels. HBK would be teaming up with Triple H once again to face The Undertaker and Kane. The immediate assumption here is that HBK done it for the money, and it's a very fair assumption. It's a ridiculously large payday in Saudi Arabia, and one that Shawn Michaels thought was worth coming back for. When trying to explain why he returned for the one-off match, Shawn said, "It was a special request from my boss. I just feel like if you're in a tag match, it's not the same thing. I know it's not right to say it, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but to me it just felt like a house show that somebody asked me to make, and I went ahead and did it in a tag match and got it over with." Shawn also explained that he'd never have another opportunity in his life to share the ring with The Undertaker, Kane and Triple H, and this too was apparently a big factor in his decision. But the whole Saudi Arabian money thing admittedly just can't be overlooked. It is what it is, and if Shawn felt it was the right thing to do, then he felt it was the right thing to do. The match, however, was absolutely brutal. DX, now representing the NXT brand, where Shawn and Hunter do extensive work behind the scenes, came out to a great ovation, and I'll admit I was extremely pleased to see Shawn back, even if it was just for a tag match in a less than perfect setting. But then the bell rang and things fell apart pretty fast. Triple H got injured early into the bout, and The Undertaker was going through a tough time in regards to his match quality. Taker was trying to come to terms with his own retirement, but he was seeking that one last big match and send-off. It didn't happen at Crown Jewel 2018. Kane's mask even got punched off during the match. Pretty much anything that could go wrong did go wrong. If I'm honest, I felt Shawn Michaels worked better than everyone else involved in the match, even though there was a rough looking moonsault from HBK to the outside of the ring, but really, it doesn't make a difference. The match was bad, everyone involved knew it was bad, and I'm sure it wasn't how HBK imagined his comeback match turning out. I will say this though, all of these men were of a good age in 2018. We can't expect 1997 performances here. We should have kept our expectations in check, and I'll admit I got carried away when a Shawn Michaels return match was announced. I kinda expected something more when I really shouldn't have. Anyway, Triple H scored the win with a weak pedigree. Shawn said that no one bothers him about coming back for one more match anymore, so at least that part makes him happy. D-Generation X were inducted into the 2019 Hall of Fame, and their acceptance speech was very entertaining. The group even went out of their way to talk about Chyna, one of the true originals of DX and someone we thought wouldn't get brought up at all. X-Pac got quite emotional during the speech. Shawn Michaels and Triple H goofed around, Billy Gunn tried to make a little remark about being an AEW employee, which led to Triple H calling the organisation a pissant company. All good stuff, and again, very entertaining. As mentioned earlier, Shawn and Hunter now work behind the scenes at NXT. Hunter leading the way while Shawn works as the head of the Performance Center. Not bad for two guys who were bearing their asses on weekly TV to try and grab a rating. Who knows when DX will show up on our screens again, though you do feel that it's always inevitable, and whether you enjoy these reunions or not is completely up to you. For fans who lived through the dawn of the Attitude Era though, and for fans who understand the true impact that HBK and Hunter had all those years ago, then these fans would probably find another DX reunion quite welcoming. Thanks very much for watching.